Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather follows Don Vito Corleone, the aging patriarch of the Corleone crime family, as he transfers control of his empire to his youngest son, Michael Corleone. Vito and Michael, together and separately, navigate their way through the murky underworld, dodging assassination attempts and treachery in order to protect their families and expand their empires. In order to do this, the Dons need good people around them, efficient captains, loyal soldiers, and intelligent consiglieres. They also need muscle, and for Don Vito Corleone there was no greater aggressive asset in the Corleone family than Luca Brasi, one of the most feared men in the underworld. I've made several videos on Luca Brasi looking deep into his backstory, so check them out on the channel if you're interested and subscribe for more videos. But in short, Luca Brasi was the battering ram of the Corleone Empire, Vito Corleone's personal enforcer who often acted as his bodyguard and who had a vicious history and terrifying reputation. He could perform a murder, or even a series of murders, with no backup. In one infamous series of events, he murdered 6 men in 2 weeks, which ended the olive oil wars. The importance of having a man so effective and yet so loyal like Luca Brasi cannot be understated. As Vito Corleone says in Mario Puzo's novel The Godfather, "There are men in this world who go about demanding to be killed. They argue in gambling games. They jump out of their cars in a rage if someone so much as scratches their fender. These people wander through the streets calling out, 'Kill me, kill me.' Luca Brasi was such a man, and since he wasn't scared of death, and in fact looked for it, I made him my weapon, because I was the only person in the world that he truly hoped would not kill him." There is no character in The Godfather like Luca Brasi, so when he is unexpectedly killed by Virgil Sollozo and Bruno Tataglia, it weakens the Corleones heavily. It's not so much that a vulnerable gap is left in the family's defences, they were still quite capable, but the key offensive force of the family had been eradicated. Eventually, long after Brasi's death, Vito Corleone goes into semi-retirement and acts as a mentor and advisor to his son Michael, who is now head of the family. And throughout scenes of Michael engaging in business or having family meetings, we see this character, Al Neri, at his side at almost all times. Al Neri is not a major character at all in the Godfather films. He doesn't even have any lines of dialogue in the first movie. However, he is something of a dark horse, a fan favourite given the way he carries himself. Unlike Luca, who looks like he might eat you, Al Neri is classy, gentlemanly, quiet and mysterious, and yet strikingly sharp when called upon. Interestingly, this character is considered by the Corleones to be a replacement for Luca Brasi. He is the new Luca, in a manner of speaking, the new personal enforcer and bodyguard of the new Don Corleone. In fact, in a deleted scene of The Godfather, when referencing Al Neri, Vito Corleone says to his son Michael, "I think you found your Luca Brasi." Portrayed by Richard Bright, Al Neri is seen in the first Godfather film after Michael's return from Sicily, apparently having become his bodyguard and going on to accompany him when taking care of family business. He might not have a reputation as vicious as Luca Brasi, but Al Neri sure does a lot more than Brasi in the films. It is he who kills Emilio Brazzini, the main antagonist of the first Godfather movie, by disguising himself in a police uniform and gunning down Brazzini and his men on the steps of a courthouse. Neri is also the one who kills Las Vegas casino tycoon Mo Green in the book, although in the film the murder is committed by another Corleone assassin. In the second Godfather film, Al Neri becomes the de facto second-in-command to Michael Corleone and is a capo regime alongside Rocco Lampone and Frank Pentangeli. He is thought to be responsible for the murder of a prostitute, which was done to guarantee the loyalty of Senator Pat Geary. And in a deleted scene, Neri uses his brute force to persuade Mike Klingman, a hotel owner, to give his interest in the hotel to the Corleones. Al Neri's special place in Michael Corleone's eyes can perhaps never be better stated than when he is given the secret, sacrilegious and cold task of executing Michael's brother Fredo at the end of the second film. His loyalty to Michael is emphasized further when it is shown that even years later in The Godfather Part 3, Al Neri is still working for Michael as his bodyguard and underboss. He refers to Michael as Mikey in the third film, implying the two have a close relationship, and he even saves Michael's life, being the one to blast open the locked doors during the helicopter hit so that Michael could escape. And it's suggested that Neri even goes on to work for the Corleones beyond Michael, working for his nephew Vincent after he takes over, the murder of the corrupt Archbishop Gilday being his first major act in the new regime. Either that or maybe the murder was a swan song and Neri shortly retired. Now, just like with his predecessor Luca Brasi, we don't know much about Al Neri outside of the little we see of him on screen, but just like Brasi, Al Neri has a very interesting history which is expanded upon in Mario Puzo's The Godfather. Ironically, given his life in a criminal empire, Al Neri was actually a police officer, so the scene where he dresses up as a cop before killing Brazzini isn't simply a clever disguise, it's a throwback to Neri's previous life. His years of keeping the streets clean by assaulting Italian youths who run in gangs. It's Neri donning the uniform one last time, except now as a mask for his true identity. When Neri was a rookie policeman, he married the love of his life, Rita, who he adored for her innocence and virtue. Neri had a sharp, unbending sense of right and wrong. He was strong and had a furious Sicilian temper, but he was never angry with his wife. Within the space of 5 years, Al Neri had become one of the most feared policemen on the New York force. He was honest, but he had his own way of enforcing the law. In particular, Al Neri detested punks, and he did not hesitate in using his extraordinary physical strength to get his point across to perps. Neri's favourite weapon was a huge flashlight. He really had use for his gun. In fact, often his face was enough to scare punks into submission, with the book describing his face when angry as brutally menacing. In one incident, Neri lined up several older teenagers who had been stopping passerbys and asking for cigarettes and teasing girls with sexual gestures. His partner stayed in the car, knowing what was coming, and Neri let the non-Italian boys go, but then beat the one Italian kid, smashing him across the forehead with his flashlight and calling him a disgrace to all Italians, giving them a bad name. And if some poor sod decided to fight back Neri on one of his assaults, or dare I say it, pull out a knife, Neri would batter them to such an extent that their bloody, unconscious bodies would be thrown into the patrol car, and they would be charged with assaulting a police officer, after they had been discharged from the hospital, of course. After not showing the proper respect to his precinct sergeant, Neri was transferred to the area that held the UN building area, and with their diplomatic immunity, Neri would find United Nations officials with their limousines parked all over the streets with no regard to police regulation. And after his complaints to his precinct were met with instructions to ignore the parking violations, Neri found himself facing a whole side street that was unpassable due to the parked cars, so he took his trusty flashlight and began smashing windscreens to smithereens. He continued this for a week until his precinct found out and he was transferred to Harlem. On one Sunday dinner with his wife at his sister's place, Neri's sister's son, a 20-year-old wild hoodlum with no father, showed disrespect and swore at his mother, a common incident in the household. Neri gave the kid a merciless beating, whose attempts at self-defense quickly transitioned to begs of mercy. In front of his wife and sister, Neri slapped the boy's face until his lips were bloody and swollen. He rocked his head back and smashed him against the wall. He punched him in the stomach and slapped his face into the carpet after having him lay on the floor. Away from the women, he then threatened the boy, telling him that his beating would feel like kisses from a woman if he spoke to his mother again in the same way. 2 months later, Al Neri returned from a late shift to find that his wife had packed all her clothes and gone back to her family. She had left him. Her father told him that it was because Rita was afraid of him, afraid of living with his temper. Al was stunned with disbelief. He had never hit his wife, threatened her, spoke harshly to her. He had nothing but affection for her, and was bemused by her decision to leave him. So he decided to wait a few days and then go to her family's home to talk to her. However, the next night, everything changed. His car answered the call of a deadly assault in Harlem. Upon arriving at the location, he jumped out of the car with it still rolling to a stop, flashlight in hand. A crowd had gathered outside a tenement doorway, and a black woman told Neri that a man was cutting a little girl inside. Upon entering, Al Neri was faced with a shocking sight. He almost tripped over the bodies of 2 black women, one about 25 and the other no more than 12, bloody razor cuts on their faces and bodies. In the living room, Neri locked eyes on the man responsible, Wax Baines, a notorious pimp and dope pusher known to Neri, who Neri had arrested 2 weeks before for cutting up one of his whores. Neri had never much liked black people, and his experiences in Harlem lessened his opinion of them. Baines' eyes were popping from whatever drugs he was on. His bloody knife wavered. Neri was infuriated with his brazen breaking of the law, sickened by the sight of the little girl, and in his own mind, he had decided that Baines would not be taken to the station. But a crowd had already developed behind him, including his partner. Neri issued orders for Baines to drop his knife. Baines laughed and held his knife up at Neri, and Neri caught the thrust of Baines's move with his left palm, and with his right hand swung the flashlight in a vicious arc which dropped Baines to the floor, looking comical and hopeless. But then, Al Neri, in front of witnesses and his partner, who would later testify at his criminal trial, swung the flashlight again so hard the glass shattered and the bulb was sent flying across the room. Baines's skull was caved in, and he died 2 hours later in hospital. Neri was suspended for using excessive force, and he was later indicted under criminal charges for manslaughter, being convicted and sentenced to from 1 to 10 years in prison. He was shocked, baffled and utterly confused at the way he had been treated, the way he had been judged a criminal, that they had dared to send him to jail, filled with scum, for killing an animal like that pimp. Neri was filled with incensed rage and bitterness. Did the cops, judges and courts not care about the little girl, disfigured for life and still in hospital? When it was all said and done, Al Neri was filled with a hatred of all society, though he did not fear prison, and he felt he would be taken care of given the nature of his offence and his having been a policeman. Several of his buddy officers had assured him so. Only his father-in-law, a Bronx fish market owner, realized that a man like Al Neri had little chance of surviving a year in prison, and felt guilty that his daughter had left a fine husband out of some womanly foolishness. Being someone who paid protection money to the Corleone crime family and supplying them with the finest fish available as a gift, Rita's father was in a position to use his contacts to get the Corleones to intercede in this matter. The Corleone family already knew about Al Neri. He was considered something of a legend as a legitimately tough police officer. He had a feared reputation as a man who should not be taken lightly, the kind of man the Corleones were always interested in. The fact that he was a policeman did not matter much. After all, as the book tells us, many young men started down a false path to their true destiny. Time and fortune usually set them aright. Peter Clemenza, the same man who mentored Rocco Lampone, brought Al Neri to the attention of Tom Hagen. After reading the police dossier and speaking with Clemenza, Tom remarked, "Maybe we have another Luca Brasi here." So Al Neri, sitting in his temporary jail cell awaiting to be moved to prison, was told that the judge had reconsidered his case based on new information, and he was released. Neri knew what had happened and paid back his debt to his father-in-law by agreeing to divorce from Rita. Then he paid a visit to the Corleones to thank them. Michael Corleone greeted Neri himself, and warmly. He said, "Hell, I couldn't let them do that to a fellow Sicilian. They should have given you a medal. But those damn politicians don't give a shit about anything except pressure groups. Listen, I would have never stepped into the picture if I hadn't checked everything out and saw what a raw deal you got. One of my people talked to your sister and she told us how you were always worried about her and her kid, how you straightened the kid out, kept him from going bad. Your father-in-law says you're the finest fellow in the world. That's rare." The highly manipulative and tactful Michael Corleone did not mention anything about Neri's wife leaving him, and after chatting, the usually reserved Neri opened up to Michael. The Don was only 5 years his senior, but Neri spoke to him like he was much older, like he was a father. Finally, Michael offered Neri work as a hotel security man in Vegas. He even offered Neri a bank loan for him to go into his own business, and a grateful but embarrassed Neri proudly refused, and added that he needed to stay under the jurisdiction of the court with his suspended sentence. Michael informed him that that could be easily dealt with, and the meeting finished with Al Neri saying that if he needed help, he'll be in touch. However, Michael insisted that Neri come and have lunch with him and his family, saying his father would like to meet him, and the resulting dinner was the most agreeable afternoon Neri had since being a boy. And Don Vito was delighted to discover that Neri's parents had come from a small village only a few minutes from his own. The talk was good, the food was good, and Neri was struck with the feeling that he was with his own true people. He had found his place in the world. Vito extended his warmness to Neri and offered him his services. Neri knew he was being courted, but he also understood that the Corleone family approved of the actions which society had condemned and punished him for. The family valued him, society did not. He knew he would be happier amongst the Corleones, and in less than 3 days he visited Michael again and put his cards out on the table. He did not want to work in Vegas, but would take a job with the family in New York. He made his loyalty clear, and Michael was touched. After being given a free vacation in Miami and a month's salary in advance, Neri was put into Clemenza's regime to be tested, and within a year he had made his bones. Clemenza was full of praise for Al Neri, calling him the new Luca Brasi, saying that he would be better than Luca Brasi. As such, Clemenza knew Neri was not a man to be controlled by a man like himself, so Neri was put under the direct command of Michael Corleone, with Tom Hagen acting as the buffer. His loyalty to Michael was unshakable, his reflexes and coordination the best around, and he was Michael's man to the death. Vito Corleone had once said to his son regarding Luca Brasi, "Brasi is a powerful weapon to be used. The trick is that since he does not fear death and indeed looks for it, then the trick is to make yourself the only person in the world that he truly desires not to kill him. He has only that one fear, not of death, but that you may be the one to kill him. He is yours then." This was one of the most valuable lessons Michael learned from his father, and he used it to make Al Neri his Luca Brasi. And that is the backstory of the quiet, reserved and deadly assassin of the Corleone crime family, Albert Neri. What do you think of Al? Is he one of your favourite characters? How do you think he compares to Luca Brasi? Let me know in the comments below. And for more videos and related content, consider subscribing to the channel, and thanks for watching.